Hello and welcome to the Pup Mommy. Well, it's October and you know what that means. October is Adopt a Dog from a Shelter Month. And in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about thinking first about, before you adopt that dog from a shelter, knowing exactly what you're getting into and what you're in for. So in part one of this video, I'm going to take you through actually going to the shelter, what to expect when you get to the shelter, what you're going to find and what you're going to be looking at in terms of dogs. And in part two of the video, I'm going to be, which is another video, I'm going to be taking you through what to do when you bring your shelter dog home, what you can expect. So let's get started. Now, when you get to the shelter, yeah, well, yeah, I love you too. I love you too. All right, now when you get to the shelter, what kind of dogs can you expect to see there? Well, predominantly you're going to see mixed breeds, and of the mixed breeds, you're going to see your fair share of pit bull terriers. But there are also some purebred dogs there as well. Now, where do these dogs come from? Well, they can come from a variety of different places, but there's usually a couple of categories. The first are owner surrenders, and they can be owner surrenders for any number of reasons. And the second group of dogs that you're going to find there are dogs that were picked up by animal care and control as strays. Now, the strays could be anything from dogs who have been born on the street and lived on the street for years to dogs that suddenly found themselves lost. An open gate, an open door. Next thing you know, their families are looking for them and they never quite reconnected. And then you're also going to find the unfortunate dogs too, who were basically dumped by their owners because the owner didn't want to take the time to bring them to the shelter. Kind of dogs also can be found in shelters. What about the dogs that enter those shelters for the first time? What you should be aware of. With owner surrenders, these dogs who come in are basically going to be pretty darn shell-shocked. They've lived with their owners, whether the owner, passed away and suddenly the dog finds itself at the shelter. So it could have lived with the owner for 15 years, 8 years, 6 years, 4 years, 2 months, doesn't matter. The dog has become acclimated to certain surroundings and now all of a sudden it's taken from those surroundings and is put into a small barren cage with maybe a small bed and a toy. Shelters are basically noisy. So the next thing you know, and rarely quiet, so the next thing you know, sometimes dogs either get very, very hyper because they just have this, they just don't know what's going on, or you may have dogs that just totally shut down and hide in corners and start shaking. All of the dogs are evaluated upon intake, and any dogs that are deemed by the staff to be difficult for owners, and that could be for any number of reasons, and that's based on how the dog it was evaluated and how the dog acted upon intake evaluation. Those dogs that are designated rescue only are rescue only. You're not going to be allowed to adopt that dog unless you go to a rescue and say, I want that dog, can you get the dog out of the shelter and then I'll get the dog from you. That's one possibility. Another thing to note about dogs too with strays are used to having run of the road, literally. They're used to have freedom. It's not a great life, but they have that freedom, and now all of a sudden they're cooped up. They can also have, borderline mental problems from being cooped up in a cage, depends on how long they've been there. Another dog that doesn't necessarily do well in a shelter are some dogs that need a job and need exercise. I'm thinking specifically of, for example, Belgian Malinois, or you occasionally see Border Collies, Australian Shepherds. These dogs also, because of their high intelligence and because they need that job to do and they need exercise, they're also going to sometimes be a little more hyperactive and look like they're a little bit more difficult, but don't necessarily think that. Again, look at the breed, look at the background of the dog, and also talk to the shelter staff. Shelter staff always usually has favorites in the shelter. Talk to them, find out why. Now, before you go to the shelter, do yourself a favor, do your family a favor, do the dog a favor, and do your research, do your homework. Have in the back of your mind what kind of dog you want. Now, you may think of dog in terms of size, in terms of energy, and energy and activity is very important, but you know what is not necessarily the dog's size, it's the dog's temperament. You can have very large dogs, very giant dogs, and they can be incredible schmooshes. But you can also have little chihuahuas, or you could have other little small dogs that could be tiny terrors. So the things that you're looking for when you go to a shelter dog, when you adopt a dog in general, are temperament and energy level and activity, because you're going to have to be able to keep up with that dog and handle that dog. Now, when you are there at the shelter, don't be surprised if you have this dog in your mind and then you come home with a dog that's 180 degrees different. All right? Because adopting a dog is a balancing act between your head, your heart, and your instincts. When you're at the shelter and you're going through down the line and you're looking at all of these different dogs, be sure to read what is on the cage, or on the, in terms of the intake form. That's the evaluation form that you're going to be looking at. See what the shelter's comments are, and as I mentioned earlier, if you happen to have staff there, talk to the staff about which are their favorites and find out why. And also, one thing to note as well, when you are in the shelter and you happen to be going down the row, don't always look at the dogs that come up to the cage automatically. Take a look also at the dogs that are there, that are maybe hiding behind in a corner, or they're kind of, as I said earlier, shut down. Some dogs, they're sentient beings. In fact, all dogs are sentient beings. They feel emotions, and they also have memories. So some dogs that are in a corner or not really paying attention to you, they may have been there for a while, and they may have given up hope entirely of ever being adopted. So don't necessarily pass over those dogs. And you know what? I'll tell you something. For the dogs that are shut down, that are hiding in a corner, those are the ones that are, they're usually the ones that are bypassed and overlooked, and you know what that means, because the ones that are overlooked and bypassed are the ones that eventually, when their time is up, it's up, and you know what that means. Another thing to think about also when you're going down the row of cages, if you see dogs that are barky and hyperactive, does that mean they're going to be barky and hyperactive at home? Well, some may, yes, that's true, some may, but then also keep in mind too that shelters are noisy places. Again, as I said earlier, they're rarely quiet. And dogs that seem to be barky can also be those that want attention, and they may have a different personality when they're out of the shelter. This is where a meet and greet is very important, so that you can see the dog a little bit more close up. But also keep in mind too that dogs who are surrendered to shelters, 96% of them have received no training whatsoever. Another thing, depending on the area of the country where you're located, there are some dogs that are going to be in shelters, and these dogs have never lived in a home. They've lived outside the home, they've lived on the grounds of the home, but they've never lived in the home. Now that is going to present an entirely new set of issues. You're going to have, if you've fallen in love with a dog who spent its life in a kennel or spent its life somewhere on the grounds but not in a home, you're going to have incredible patience, and you're going to have to really have fallen in love with that pup, because that's a whole different, as I said earlier, a whole different set of problems. I've been through it, I know. So in summary, say now that you have found the dog in the shelter that you really like, the kids like, the family likes. Before you take that final step, and you've basically done your meet and greet, before you take that final step, if you happen to have another dog at home, or you have a cat, all right, make an appointment, put a hold on the dog that you have in mind, or dogs that you have in mind, and then go home. Bring your dog back with you, or bring your cat with you, or both of them if you happen to have them, and then introduce the dogs, the potential adoptee and your dog, and see what happens. I did that with my Zarina, my German Shepherd Zarina, and I will tell you, I got thumbs down. Dogs don't have thumbs, but I could tell from her reaction that it wasn't going to work. All right, but it's much better to do it this way than to bring the dog home and find out that they're going to clash, and then the next thing you know, you're returning the dog. The dog's upset, you're upset, you don't want that. So if you have any questions or comments or on anything that I've said, or please feel free to contact me. I'll leave my information in the description section. Also, I will leave a couple of links to my ebook, To Puppy or Not to Puppy, which will help you decide even if you're ready for a dog. And then I also have a freebie, which is breeder, rescue, or shelter. Which route should you take? That's also available for download, so you can take a look at that as well on my website. I'll leave all that information in the description section. So thank you for watching. I appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best, because shelter dogs are indeed so special. And dogs are special anyway, according to me. But again, thank you for watching. Bye for now.